Okay, I think it's going. Okay, again, welcome everybody. Today, our collector comes from a label that Mina actually recently asked me about. And you may have seen one of these before. We have a good number of them. The collector in this case is O. Beccari. It's a little easier to see on labels like this that are printed, and we have a number of those as well. This one in particular was collected on a Mount Singalang, which is actually this volcano here in Indonesia, in Western Sumatra. It was collected in here. This is Italian for June through July 1878. The specimen here is identified as Somatophyllum gracilicale, which is now a synonym of Acroporium diminutum. And I couldn't find a picture of this exact species alive, but this is one from the same genus. And its family, Somatophyllaceae, are known as signal mosses, and they grow on rocks in wet or humid places. And the genus Acroporium is mostly commonly found in the southern hemisphere. So O. Beccari, which I was happy to find actually a lot of great sites about, which was surprising because I had never actually searched his name, so I was pleasantly surprised. But he was an Italian botanist, which you might have guessed based on the language of his label. He was born in Florence in 1843. Sadly, his mother passed away when he was a baby, and his father died when he was 6. So he and his siblings were mostly raised by his maternal uncle, Minuccio Minucci, which I thought was an amazing name. From the age of 10, he attended the Royal College in Lucca, and to this day, it is a prestigious secondary school where he showed an early interest, again, in botany and natural history. One of his teachers, Ignacio Mazzetti, was a passionate botanical collector and inspired Beccari to start his own herbarium. His first specimens actually date back to 1856, so when he was 13 years old. He also met Cesare Bicci, who was the director of the botanical garden in Lucca. And it's said that the young Beccari brought him a species of tulip that he hadn't seen before. It turned out to be a new species, and Bicci named it after him, a Tulipa Beccariana, in 1860. So a pretty unique honor for a 17-year-old. In August of 1861, he published his first scientific paper and also enrolled in studying natural science at the University of Pisa. And while he was there, he worked with several notable naturalists and was made an assistant of botany, but he ended up leaving the university. So sources kind of credit different things, conflict with professors or his restless character. And so he quit that position and ended up transferring to the University of Bologna in 1864. And he graduated later that year, and his thesis was actually on the structure of the lichen Arnoldia cyathoides. So he had an early connection with cryptogams. After graduating, he met Giacomo Doria in Genoa, who is another Italian botanist, naturalist, herpetologist, entomologist, and the two would become lifelong colleagues and friends. They decided to conduct an expedition together to Sarawak, which is a region in the northwest of the island of Borneo. So today it's in the country of Malaysia. And at that time, it was very poorly explored by Europeans. To get ready for this expedition, Beccari went to study natural history specimens for a few months in early 1865 in London, specifically or especially at the Natural History Museum and the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew. While he was there, he met a number of important British scientists, including Charles Darwin and William Hooker and Joseph Hooker, who are a father-son duo of botanists. And he also met Sir James Brooke, who was the first Raja of Sarawak. He was actually a British soldier who became the ruler of that region in 1841. And he actively encouraged scientists to visit and study the natural environment. So he supported Beccari and Doria's plans. So Beccari left England in April of 1865. He traveled through Egypt, Yemen, Sri Lanka, Singapore, en route to Sarawak, and the pair arrived in June of 1865. Sadly, Doria had to leave early and go back to Italy because of health problems, but Beccari would stay for the next 3 years, working in the forest with his team of helpers. They collected many samples of plants, shells, butterflies, various insects and animals. In 1866, he discovered and described the plant Thismia neptunus, which you can see as drawing here. It's also called fairy lantern. So he drew pictures of it, but he didn't collect any specimens. And this plant was actually not observed again by scientists until 2017. So 151 years later, a team of Czech botanists actually found it again in a very similar area. And they took these photos you can see here in the paper that they published. It's really interesting. The plant is only found in Malaysia. It's a mycoheterotroph, so it means it obtains nutrients through a parasitic relationship with fungi. And most of the time it lives completely underground. So it only puts up this flower once every few years. The flower only is above ground for a few weeks. So that kind of makes it, kind of explains, I guess, why it's less likely that it would have been seen for so long. And it's believed there are fewer than 50 individual plants in the world today, so it's critically endangered. Personally, I think it looks like a little bit of something out of the Aliens movies. It's kind of creepy, but also very interesting. So he became very interested in palms, describing 130 new species in 25 different genera. In 1867, he visited a different region of Sarawak and hunted and collected orangutans. And he assembled one of the best specimen collections of those animals at that time. He also collected and described a number of other new taxa, including durian, the king of fruits, and a new species of Rafflesia, which is this parasitic flowering plants with giant parasitic flowering plants. And he named that species after John Brooke. So living in a hut in the jungle, he designed a space for drying plants, preparing zoological specimens, and it became a really active and efficient lab. He spent hours arranging the collection, making drawings, recording detailed descriptions. He had a few misadventures on his explorations, including getting lost in the forest for 2 days with no compass or food. But it was disease that eventually ended his expedition. So in 1868, he contracted malaria and elephantiasis, and so he had to return to Italy. But before leaving, he called for preservation and conservation of the biodiversity in the region. And the Raja afterwards established a preserve, which is now part of Cuba National Park. So back in Florence, he published the New Italian Botanical Journal, which he edited for the first 3 years. And that journal published research from Italian botanists, including his collections in Borneo. He also published results in the Bulletin of the Italian Geographic Society and collaborated with specialists on the specimens he brought back, including well-known German biologist Ernst Hampy and lichenologist August von Krempelhuber. So he did not stay settled for too long, and in 1870 he went on expedition to Eritrea in Africa with a couple other Italian geologists and naturalists. He visited the Assab region and studied the local biodiversity along with nearby country of Bogos. Italy was in the process of purchasing the Assab region at this time, and that colonization was not entirely peaceful. So we can't deny that many naturalists benefited from colonial expansion, and you can't applaud their scientific discoveries without acknowledging some of the dark aspects of those campaigns. So something to always keep in mind. The following year, he left for an expedition to New Guinea with ornithologist naturalist Luigi D'Albertis. And that region was controlled by the Dutch at the time. So they stopped in Batavia, which is now Jakarta, to get permission and maps. And they visited a number of islands in Indonesia en route to New Guinea, where they collected about 700 specimens. And this time, D'Albertis fell seriously ill and had to leave on an Italian ship they happened to run into. Beccari continued to visit islands, additional islands here in Indonesia. He suffered a shipwreck in the Kai Islands at one point, but was able to save his specimens. He started running out of money. So he wrote to his friend Doria, who was able to convince the city council of Genoa to send some more funds. And he traveled to some additional Indonesian localities, including Bali, the interior of Java, and then back to West Papua. But an outbreak of beriberi, which is a deficiency of vitamin B1, killed a lot of his crew, which obviously halted his explorations. But he was able to accompany a Dutch bathymetric survey. So they were mapping the ocean floor in the winter of 1875. And he used that time to further explore New Guinea. until finally in 1876, he returned to Florence after 4.5 years. So a lot of exploring. He was welcomed back with great honors from the city of Florence, including memberships and gold medals from several scientific societies. But it said he was not affected by these honors and devoted his time to his collections and to his friends, and that the glamour of exploration and the call of the wild were too strongly in his nature. So after 1 year in Florence, he decided to make another long voyage to Malaysia, which is another name for that region of Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea. And this time he was accompanied by Enrico Alberto de Albertis. So he was cousin to Luigi. And they traveled together through India, Singapore, Sarawak, Australia, New Zealand. De Albertis returned to Italy, while Beccari made additional studies of plants in West Sumatra, collecting about 1,000 different species at that time. Among those discoveries was Amorphophallus titanum, also known as the corpse flower. You may have heard of it. So it's famous for having the largest flower in the world, technically the largest unbranched inflorescence in the world, which can grow to be up as high as 10 feet tall. And it's also infamous for smelling really terrible, to attract flies and insects that pollinate it. And so he was the first to scientifically describe this species. And in a personal note, in the summer of 2021 here at UT, our greenhouse, this corpse flower, actually started blooming for the first time, and it was a big deal. It was featured in the news. It was named very fittingly Rotty Top. If you're familiar, our fight song is called Rocky Top. They put it in a case in the science building so people could come see it, and live streamed it online. Margaret and I were actually able to go check it out and see it and smell it. It was really interesting, and they actually took a poll that time to see what people thought it smelled like. I apologize for the poor picture, but I think the most common you could see was dead animal, rotten fish, garbage, compost. So really, really unique, interesting opportunity. If you ever get the chance to see and smell one, I would recommend it. So similarly, this was big news back in Beccari's time. So there was an article that said the first specimen of Amorphophallus titanum bloomed at Kew, so back in London, where Beccari had started his journey in 1885, sparking wonder and spectacle as thousands of patrons traveled to see the giant phallic flower that smelled like rotting flesh. Its bloom cycle lasted for only 3 days, conjuring up even more excitement about the plant's extreme rarity. And you can see here some illustrations from the magazine, The Gardener's Chronicle, from that time. And they had an interesting note saying it was received from Sumatra 10 years ago, having been discovered by Dr. Beccari. The tuber weighed 56 pounds at the beginning of this year and grew at the rate of 4 inches a day, eventually reaching 7 feet in height. And it said, like so many aroids, the odor was for a time most offensive, which that was a very polite way of saying that it really stunk. So very interesting. So in addition to botanical materials, he collected zoological and ethnographic specimens, and recorded a wealth of observations in his notes and letters, especially on the birds of paradise, the lives of the local Papuans. And he also made topographic surveys, which later helped draft maps of those regions. He returned to Florence in 1878. And briefly served as the director of the Florence Botanical Garden, but he resigned shortly after in 1879. Sources kind of list again a mixture of factors, including conflict with the administration, disagreement about the sale of his plant collection, moving the herbarium, and some credit his impulsive and independent character. He was also described as introverted and shy. He didn't like to be around many people, preferred just the company of kind of few trusted friends. So after that, he worked mostly independently, studying his materials in a few rooms at the Natural History Museum of Florence. In 1882 or 88, the dates did not agree in different sources. He married Nella Goretti de Flamini, and they would go on to have 4 sons. The eldest of those sons, Nello Beccari, became a professor of comparative anatomy at the Florence University and would go on to posthumously edit some of his father's papers. He began to publish a large work, Malaysia, detailing the results of his studies, but the publication was stopped after a few volumes because of lack of funds. In May of 1897, he was visited in Florence by Lady Margaret Brooke. So she was the wife of the Raja of Sarawak. And she convinced him to write a book about his explorations in Borneo. She actually helped him prepare the book, providing him with illustrations and some photographs that she had taken herself. And it was published in 1902. And the book became really famous all over the world. It was translated into several languages, including the English version, Wanderings in the Great Forests of Borneo, in 1904. So in later years, he continued to study and publish on palms at his home, the Castle of Bizarno, which is pretty cool down here, working with specimens that he collected, as well as ones that were sent to him from collectors around the world. In his last years, he was arranging his diaries, notes, and observations from his expeditions, hoping to publish a second book about his explorations, but he passed away before he was able to in 1920 at the age of 77. So the International Plant Names Index lists over 1,400 different taxa that were described or revised by Beccari, including the genus Misadventures, which he actually named in honor of his teacher, Ignacio Misadventures, who first encouraged him to study botany, which I thought was pretty cool. He published over 150 books and papers on a wide range of topics. In addition to the honors and awards previously mentioned, the Botanical Journal Beccariana, which is published by a Papuan Herbarium, was named after him. And in 2020, which was 100 years after his death, the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture in Sarawak hosted a Beccari centenary. And there's a really, really cool website that they created as part of this, talking about the history of botany in the area, how it's continuing today. So I'll definitely send that out in the links this week. And there isn't even a street in Florence that is named after him. So it was a Via Odoardo Beccari. You can see here on this map, and this is actually like a little street view of it. And it's very green, which I thought was quite fitting, a lot of plants. There are a ton of taxa named after him, you can see, including a lot of plants in a variety of families, a lot of animals in a lot of different groups. His biological specimens are largely housed in the Museum of Natural History in Florence, including 21,000 sheets, over 2,000 alcohol specimens, 800 fruit and seed specimens, 200 wood samples, and there's duplicates in a range of major herbaria around the world. He has zoological collections that are thousands of skins, skeletons, alcohol specimens, and his ethnographic collections are also stored and displayed in Florence. And all these materials have been used by numerous researchers around the world since they were collected. Specimen-wise, we surprisingly don't have a lot in the portals, so just a little bit over 300 in the Bryophyte portal, 18 in the lichen portal, and just 9 in our vascular symbiota. But when I searched on GBIF, which is a larger kind of data aggregator, I found almost 4,000. And obviously there's a lot more housed in international collections that may just not be digitized yet. So pretty cool. So again, I'll end with a quote. Odoardo Beccari was a great explorer, but at the same time, a very clever, many-sided, careful collector. Indeed, he did incredible work in the field. In his long and lonely explorations in Malaysia, Beccari was attracted by all aspects of nature and human life and assembled an enormous wealth of botanical, zoological, ethnological, and anthropological collections. Not only the number of the specimens makes his collections really invaluable, but also the fact that these are often accompanied by notes and descriptions, and sometimes by splendid and detailed drawings made in the field. So that is Odoardo Beccari. Again, just an overview. You can see in the background some of his specimens on GBIF, which you can see again, just a little smattering of the range of types of materials that he was collecting. So definitely a wide interest. And thanks again for listening.